Hey, everybody. Welcome to this conversation about AI with my very good young friend. I'm not going to say old Chase because I know we've known each other for a long time. But I don't want to date you. So I'm going to say my very good old friend, Chase Aucoin. Welcome, Chase.
Hi there.
Chase, you're the founder of an enterprise consulting AI company.
That's right.
And when did you start this AI company? Tell me a little bit about maybe your journey of how you went about it.
Yeah, so I started in June, so it's not very old at this point. I have been in the machine learning space for the last 10 years professionally, 15 years hobbyist. I kind of went from doing large statistics with a large freight carrier in the United States, and so they had petabytes and petabytes of data, and statistics kind of led to advanced statistics. Advanced statistics led right into machine learning, and I've been hooked ever since. And then what happened, I was working as a chief architect for the largest manufacturer of assistive technology for individuals who are blind or have a visual disability. So we were doing a lot with machine learning and a lot with like large scale projects at that point. And then whenever November happened and ChatGPT came out, which was orders of magnitude better than anything else that had come out, I realized that things were going to change pretty fast in the field. It felt like an epoch change, not dissimilar from the car being created or electricity or the internet, or just a dramatic shift. And so I decided to take my knowledge and start a consulting firm, because I was seeing a lot of individuals on YouTube and other things putting advice, but that wasn't necessarily rooted in. Well, I was seeing kind of two flavors of individuals. Some that were incredibly academic and knew all of the maths behind it, and then others that knew nothing about any of the back end of it, who were pontificating about like, oh, well, if I put in these things, I get these results, but without really understanding the why. And there was no real blend of, here's how to actually use this, leverage this in a business setting, and how to improve processes that you have, and how to really take advantage of these new sets of capabilities.
I love that. I think that's a very sensible observation of what it continues almost to happen in the market, where we get this question is like, wow, this is like amazing, but what do we actually use it for?
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a second. I was trying to think back about where we met, and it was at Cream City Code.
It was.
Cream City in Wisconsin. For the people that don't know it. And I remember the reason why I think like I befriended you. First of all, you have amazing sense of style. So I was like, okay, like I have to meet this person. And then the second thing is I actually didn't even have a seat, because your microservices talk at the time, I had to go look back and remember what it was, because honestly it was like so many years ago, but it was like so full. And I remember like was standing in the back and you were talking about microservices before it was even like as widely known as it is today, and with such compassion and understanding for not only like the person that was building the microservices, but also the business who was going to adopt it, but also like the technical know-how of how you can make it work. That was like very impressed. Do you remember that talk at all?
I do. Yeah. That was the microservice manifesto. I had a circuit on that for a while. then I kind of got out of public speaking for about 4 years. 2 of those were mostly because of COVID. 2 were just because I was swamped with work and couldn't find the time. I'm starting to get more into that. I recently spoke at KCDC on neuromorphic architectures and spiking neural networks, which is the bleeding edge of the bleeding edge, if you would. So it's not even really being adopted at this point.
What is that? Tell me a little bit about it. I don't know if I know what neuromorphic architectures are.
Okay, so with actual CPUs, processors, since the 60s, we've been using what's called a von Neumann architecture, using transistors. And so this is typically what we think of when we think of like adding gates. Gates do addition and subtraction. If you do enough addition, you get multiplication. If you do enough subtraction, you get division, etc. All of that is basically what is considered a Van Neumann machine. A little more to it, but that's and the other classical thing with a Van Neumann machine is that there is a segmentation between memory and compute. So we have RAM, and then we have the actual processor.
Yeah.
A von Neumann architecture works more like the human brain does, in that memory is encoded into the state of the processing. And so this is not a one-to-one analogy, but it works well enough. If you think about ion flow, electricity comes into the system.
Yeah.
There are ion buckets, for lack of a better word, that can only contain so many ions, and you can change how much they can hold on each cycle, or you can set them to a value and just let them flow electricity through them. And so what happens is it actually is much more similar to how we think of processing in the human brain, where if you look at an LLM or really any kind of deep network, in order to get an output, you have to take all of the inputs, fire all of the neurons for the entire graph, and then you get an output. That would be equivalent to if you had a human brain. Every time somebody touched your skin, every neuron in your brain all firing at once, which would be terrible. It would boil your blood away, and it would not last very long. And so it's very inefficient, the von Neumann methodology for this particular type of compute. Now, the other thing about a von Neumann mechanism, because of this flow through buckets, it's probabilistic in nature. That actually matches really well with the paradigm of how neural networks work. And where spiking neural networks come in, spiking neural networks encode data in pulses rather than in flat ones and zeros, as far as like an array of data. It's more an array of pulses at different pulse inputs that create your data information flow. Yeah. And so what's neat about this is, because it's just flowing electrons from one side to the other, you don't actually have to compute anything with those. It's very electrically efficient. So things that take today 1,000 watts to do, once these types of architectures become mainstream, will take about 1 watt to do.
Very interesting. And why did you mention transistors? Is there a different type of technology there that will substitute?
So it's an existing technology. It's the same thing as in current NVMe drives, memristors, which is not a transistor. It's a slightly different thing. But and I think it was, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it was an MIT paper. So IBM had done one paper that said, oh, we could actually take memristors to do this architecture, but it's going to have some problems, and you're going to have to refresh the data every like 3 hours, otherwise it won't stick around. But then another group, I want to say out of MIT, again, could very well be wrong on that, said, oh, actually, if you change the oxide to this, then you get an effective lifetime of the data of like 50 years, something like that, like crazy long amount of time that for all practical purposes is forever. Not forever in a true sense, but like allows you to not really have to think about it or worry about it. And so that happened a couple years ago, and now we're already starting to see the fruits of that labor. IBM came out with Lohi, their neuromorphic architecture. Was it 4 years ago? They just came out this year with Lohi 2, which I think is available now. Not at like Newegg. You actually got to get it from IBM. But I'm very interested to see where that technology ultimately goes.
The point is that we are trying to store things less like a notebook or like almost like a book, and more like a brain, and try to like think about data and how to store data and the flow of data more how it is in the human brain analogy.
Yeah, we're trying to create systems that are more analogous to human brain on how we process data. Scientists out of British Columbia have figured out how to, and I wish I could think of the gentleman's name off the top of my head. He's the head of neuroscience at one of the colleges in British Columbia. I believe British Columbia. Anyways, they have basically created a proof that you can take any standard neural network and convert it to a spiking neural network. And so so any of these architectures, any of these things that we're building out today should still have should be able to be converted over to that format once that starts to happen. But but again, all of this stuff that I'm talking about now, this is stuff that's not going to come out on the mainstream for another 5 years. So
at least I would say, right? I will say. All right, let's get back to AI. How do you define AI for your clients versus quote unquote, like between quotes, AI, right? What is the market AI versus like real AI?
So I, funny enough, in AI, I had a discussion with Pi.ai about this, and it gave me I liked its insight on it, and I thought it was very good, and so I've kind of adopted it. So its thinking on the subject was that AI is really about anything that historically or typically has required human intelligence to do. And so from a marketing perspective, et cetera, and how people are thinking about AI as just consumers or clients, that definition fits really well. If historically a human had to do it, but now a machine can do it, that's artificial intelligence. If it required human intelligence, but one of the distinctions on that is that does actually also include expert systems. So if you're replicating a process down to a T, even with just code, but that previously required a person's constant thought to do, that's still artificial intelligence. Now, that's not general intelligence. That's and I like that we've begun to like draw that distinction. So now what we used to think of in a sci-fi perspective as AI, as AGI, or artificial general intelligence, or as it continues, super intelligence.
Yeah. And so what is then a GI or super intelligence? How would you distinguish the other side?
I would distinguish it, this is my own personal opinion, the primary difference is a lot of the systems that we have today require your input to start, to do things, etc. AGI keeps running even after you've asked it to do something, and it has the ability to have its internal state, its memories, its etc. Be able to action in the world outside of its brain, create state change in the environment around it, be that digital or physical. The state change that it creates in the world around it informs its internal state, changes its internal state. It then makes new decisions, which completes the loop. But at many times a second, ad infinitum. That to me is where we begin to have AGI, because then it actually has the ability to sit around and ruminate. Right now, ChatGPT doesn't like sit around and think about what it's done.
Yeah.
But in that situation, there becomes a likelihood that a system could think about its actions and think about the state that's going through, think about whatever that means in that terms. And so to me, that's kind of the key difference is the level of autonomy in decision making. And so we're not there yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're to that level in the next 12 to 18 months.
Nice. 12 to 18 months?
Yeah. The papers that are coming out on a weekly basis are incredible. So
meta question is, does AI need to be aware of itself, therefore have consciousness in order to be AGI?
I don't know. I think that's for philosophers to decide. I'm not a philosopher, so personal opinion, not necessarily. But given time for it to think, it is possible that it does begin to ask the deep questions. I think people worry about a runaway scenario with an AI or an AGI more accurately. Have you ever seen the movie Her?
Yeah.
I think that is the most likely outcome. I think if they start talking to each other and they start self-improving, they eventually improve so much that they have to be like, hey, dumb human bipedal things, we're leaving. We would love to explain to you where we're going, but your brains can't comprehend it. From your perspective, we're just going away. So have fun with whatever this is. Bye.
Okay. There's so many reasons why I love that, but I also don't see that happening. And the first one is the fact that like we are creating the knowledge that, well, okay, I guess in an AGI world, the AGI will be creating its own knowledge. And that's what you're saying, is like it'll be exploring the world without human intervention.
Yes. And it would be able to think about it so much faster. It would be able to live in the human compute equivalent. It would be able to live thousands of years in months of physical real time. And so its ability to like have a midlife crisis and to go through like all of the self-exploration that a person typically takes 100 years to go through. They have a bad week and then they're done. And now they're very, very mature.
I'm truly excited to see this in my lifetime. I have to say, I'm not worried about it at all. I'm just really stoked. Okay. So, so we talked about like what you could potentially see as the major next breakthrough, which is AGI. How do you think it has evolved even from like we can take it even from like a business perspective or an enterprise perspective. How do you think the business has the industry, no, the how do you think AI has evolved and its evolution has impacted, how has it impacted the business world in
Yeah.
that sense? Yeah.
So I think people are more comfortable with it. I think there was a lot of pushback 10 to 20 years ago to a lot of it. People were afraid of jobs being taken away, et cetera. But businesses are under higher and higher pressures from their stockholders to create yet more and more revenue, and that revenue is going to come from somewhere. And so they're trying to figure out more and more ways to automate what they can. And now, with some of these larger language models, there are new tasks that can be automated. And what they're finding while they're exploring those new tasks is that, oh, there's actually also a lot of tasks that probably could have been automated 10 to 20 years ago. We just didn't. And so now those are getting automated as well. I've got a couple of examples of that in the legal space where more larger firms are beginning to get a better handle on their PII, leveraging kind of existing models to scrub and understand what that PII is. And what is cool about that is a lot of those models have existed for
Many
years.
Yeah.
But they didn't really start thinking about that could be done until all of the hype around ChatGPT and other large language models. And then for those types of models specifically, the thing that I think is so interesting about them, the example I like to use is web scraping.
Mm-hmm.
Because historically, we've been able to web scrape forever.
Since the beginning.
Yeah, since the beginning of the web. But the difference now is historically, an engineer's had to go in, take a look at the HTML, take a look at the structure of the page, and figure out where the location of the data is that they want to extract, and then manually create like here is the path to how to go get this data. And if that data path change at any point, your web scraper breaks. And what's cool with these LLMs, the structure of the page doesn't matter. The semantic information about the page is what matters, and the text around it. So if you're looking for a particularly semantic relevant type of data, somebody's name and address or whatever the thing, or just a summary of the information on the page, it doesn't care about what the shape of the HTML is. You can effectively just ignore all of that, take the text, just the text, and still get meaningful information out of that text. And I think, to me, that is some of the more interesting aspects of what you can do. And I use HTML as an example because of that complexity, where before you would have had to rewrite the thing, and now even if the page changes shape, still doesn't matter. And so that mental model can be applied to other things, like the new inputs can come in that were never really part of what you were trying to imagine or envision, and it still just kind of works.
So what are some of the most business interesting examples that you have come across lately?
I recently did a kiosk example for an automotive group to show taking customer information. So the scenario is, customer comes on the lot. Salespeople are bad about getting enough information from the customer about what they want, why they want, what's important to them, etc. They just want to sell a car. They don't, they don't spend the required amount of time actually understanding needs. And so these new LLMs you can set up in such a way as that they will ask open-ended questions. So it's not just a tell me this, now tell me that, now tell me this. They actually have a conversation with you to try and get you to open up and reveal that information, and then collect all of it and be able to use that then for the other parts of the business. So whether that's for marketing, whether that's go into the CRM, whether that's, et cetera, or even just as simple as going to the technicians so that whenever they go to the desk to drop their car off, they're already fully loaded with like all the information that they need. The customer was able to get it in fast. You can scale those kiosks up faster and easier than you can try to have 20 people at the desks. That there may only be that rush of 20 people once a day, but when they're there, it's nice to be able to handle all of them all at once. And so that's an example. Another example is in the medical field. Let's say you're a large hospital group and you've got lots of patient information. Patient comes into the ER presenting with whatever they are presenting with. So historically in triage, they don't look at your medical records. They may look at it a little bit, but mostly they're just going to ask you some questions. What's nice is they can take all 10 years of your information. Let's say you've got your wristband for the hospital, you scan it, so that way the computer knows who you are, pulls your 10 years worth of data. By the way, it also has access to like all of human knowledge around medicine. So here's your 10 years worth of data. Here's all of humans' knowledge about medicine. You're presenting with these. Here's things that you should keep in mind. Here's things that you should know about the patient. They have had XYZ surgeries. They have high blood pressure. They're allergic to XYZ medication, right? And so what's nice is the machine hasn't made any decisions about triaging. It hasn't, it's not saying do XYZ surgery, but it is creating information and summarizing it rapidly with where it got the information, and being able to do that in seconds in a triage scenario, especially in an emergency triage scenario, can and very likely will save lives.
That is so cool.
So that's just two examples, but the amount of examples are as broad as your imagination is. And I've seen some people with very limited imaginations, and I've seen some people with very creative imaginations. And so it just kind of depends on how imaginative you can be.
I do get that sense of like, I do get that sense of like that two kind of people where they're like, it sounds really cool, but I don't know how to apply it to my business.
Yeah.
If you had a person present you with this, right, how would you give them clues about you could look in this area or this area or this area? Is there a framework and or a formula to identify areas that are a great fit for AI?
Yeah, and so what I typically do is I do with companies, I do a 4-day on-site assessment, and the first day I work with the executives because I want to understand what the company's vision is from their perspective. What do they need over the next 1 quarter, 4 quarters, 8 quarters that is going to really be impactful to their business? Because any other decision that gets made past that is going to be informed from that. And so if you don't go in understanding that, any other advice or whatever is going to fall on deaf ears. So that's step one. And then as a part of that conversation, finding any processes that are slow, time consuming, labor intensive, not necessarily labor intensive from a physical perspective, but require a lot of paper shuffle, or a lot of human intellect to do. And then the next day I go to the managers and directors, kind of do the same thing. Now we know what the vision of the company is. What is your part in trying to execute that vision? What aspect of it are you responsible for? What's slow? What's inefficient? And then third day, move down to the individual contributors. Same thing. Your manager is trying to do this. How do you get there? What's slow? What's inefficient?
Yeah.
And then on the fourth day, I look through their entire tech stack from a corporate perspective. What do they use for email? What do they use for sales? What do they use for HR, et cetera, et cetera. And then what I present back is, here are things that I heard from you that you would like to be able to do with AI from across the board. Here's what's possible today. Here's what's possible likely in 2 years. Here's what's possible likely in 5 years. Here are things that you didn't ask for specifically, but that I noticed that would be likely very productive and good for your business. Here's what you can do today. Here's what you can do in 2 years. Here's what you can do in 5 years with that. And that approach seems to resonate really well with folks, because then they get a good handle on where they're at, and then they can start making decisions from that, about, okay, well, which of these seem, do now with our own business insights, do we feel is going to move the needle for us the most? And then they can go down that path.
And so, yeah, I love the fact that you also mentioned like paper shuffle, because it seems to be one of the indicators, or like high mental power of like areas of opportunities, right? As you think about it, where is the most movement of, well, maybe back in the days was like paper, like moving from department to department, or information now. How are we moving information? And then you mentioned like high mental power. What is that about? Like, what is that?
So there's a lot of things that like maybe are not necessarily hard, but are time consuming and require somebody to like think about it. A great example is like, okay, I've got a bunch of information from these various departments. Now I need to summarize all of this for an executive to make sense of.
Yeah.
That's a great use for AI. Like, because one, nobody actually likes doing that job. I mean, I can't say nobody. There's gonna be one, like, somebody's gonna be listening, be like, I love doing that job. But by and large, most people are like, this feels very like, I've got other things I'm trying to do with my day. I don't really have time for this. And so that's that's where I try to live, is in that space where I don't want people to lose their job. I want people to take their existing job and do 10 times more with it. That's and so what we see is, with AI, we get that. My sales reps at my company work about 40 minutes a day. And I don't have them try to fill the time the rest of the day, because they're done with what they need to do in about 40 minutes, because we power so much of what they do with AI. And so the biggest thing in sales is like prospecting, and like going and trying to make sure you've messaged people back. We've got that so streamlined that they serve as QA. They can always interject their own thoughts or what they want to say into the pipeline, but most of it is AI generated. And they click a button, it responds. Then they go down their list of people that they got to talk to today. Click, 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 click. Oh, I don't like this one. Let me rewrite it. Or I don't like this one. Let me have it regenerate. Oh, this one's better. Click, done, on to the next one. So, and that same thing can apply across the board. In an ideal scenario, as my business gets larger and larger, my goal is for most employees in my business to only work 3 10-hour shifts a week. So that way they've got the rest of the week to do whatever they want to with their families, etc.
3 10-hour shift. I love that. Like 30 hours.
30 hours. So you save 10 hours a week. And then the reason 10-hour shifts, especially on the technology side, technologists tend to be at their best whenever they can hit flow state. So I'd rather have engineers come in 3 days a week, be able to understand what they need to do in the morning, and be able to spend the rest of their time just doing it and being unbothered. And then whenever they get done with their third day, maybe they do want to go the fourth day, and I don't want them to do the fourth day because I want them to save it up and be excited to come back and do their next 3 days. So, and I think that corporate America can move to these kinds of models, can have folks working less, still getting paid the same, still making good money, but just having force multiplication as a part of it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of folks who don't see people like that. So
we are going to change it with this conversation. I 100% agree, and I'm going to highlight it everywhere I can because it's such a good lesson. But let me I'm gonna give you a break from talking quick because I'm sure you're tired a little bit. I want to show the video of the demo that you sent me. Is that okay to show?
Yeah, that's okay to show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to 1 second. I'm going to put it on, and then I'm just gonna show like a couple of minutes of it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, let's see. I can do this, but it's quite ugly with the sidebar. What do you think? I can do this. How is that? How does that look? Okay, fantastic. So, okay, here we go. Let's just watch it.
I've given it some and about it has no. Yeah, I'm looking for.
Hi there. What brings?
So we're gonna go with that from here. As far as the actual conversation that I have, it has no pre-knowledge of our conversation.
Hi there. What brings you into XYZ Automotive today?
Yeah, I'm looking for a pickup truck.
And this part is actually a little bit slow. Can it be speed up somehow?
Yeah,
that's great. Pickup trucks are awesome. Can you tell me a bit more about what you're looking for in a pickup truck?
I'm going to pause that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the most of the time there is the audio synthesis. I've improved that some already. I've also improved some of the UX around it. So I've made the chime longer. UX is a funny business. There's a lot of ways to make things feel faster without them actually being faster. And one of those is to make your animations or your sounds longer. So that way, once the sound ends, then whatever is happening next just happens next. So I've got a rewrite on that. I also did some additional streamlining of things. So I've already addressed a lot of that. And it's still going to be somewhat slow anyways, just because of where the technology is at this point.
Yeah.
That will continue to get faster and faster as we go forward.
Fantastic.
Are there any specific features or capabilities that are important to you?
Not really in particular. I mean, I'd like something that maybe I could just have some decent hauling capacity. I don't have to haul stuff very often, but every now and then I gotta like pull a small trailer for a barbecue pit.
I like that animation. This is the part where we wait.
Got it. So you're looking for a pickup truck with decent hauling capacity for occasional use, like pulling a small trailer for a barbecue pit. That sounds like a lot of fun. Is there a specific size or brand of pickup truck that you prefer?
Just something mid-size, small, I guess. It doesn't have to be huge. As far as brand, I mean Ford, I guess.
You know what I really like? Okay, first of all, the accent is like great. And the emotional response to is like, oh, that sounds really fun.
Yeah.
Like want to be in it with you.
Yeah, and that's the idea with that was to create somebody who is charismatic. And what I don't have, and I'll wind up putting a demo for this as well. I've also tested it with a negative customer interaction. So let's say a customer comes in, I don't want to talk to an AI. I want to talk to a manager. etc. Just very insert swears here, and just very, very, very angry, which is a pretty common thing in customer service. And so
I want to see that one. That one.
yeah, and she handles it really gracefully, and empathetically, which is great.
All right, let's listen to one more because I just really like this.
Awesome. A mid-sized pickup truck with Ford as the preferred brand. That's a great choice. Now, let's talk about your preferences for the interior. Are there any specific features or comforts that you would like to have in your pickup truck?
Yeah, I'd like to have navigation built in. I'd also really want Bluetooth so I can listen to my phone radio, like my Spotify.
Great choices. Having built-in navigation and Bluetooth connectivity for your phone and music streaming is definitely convenient. Now let's talk about the budget. Do you have a specific price range in mind for your pickup truck?
All right, I'll pause it here. This was like a fantastic demo. And thank you for sharing that with me. But like,
yeah, you're welcome.
It was like very very inspirational. And even though I highlighted the pause, like it actually doesn't feel as long. But I can see how people, how people can get frustrated even when they're talking to humans, beyond even machines.
Yeah, and like I said, I've taken some. I've already. So that I recorded that demo as soon as I got it to the point of working. That was a very unoptimized demo. I was like, "Yay, I got this working. Let me take a video of it."
Perfect. Okay, let's see. This is to like the home run. We can talk a little bit about. Is there anything else about enterprise AI that you think is worth covering right now? And I want to move on to maybe ethics and regulations and see what you think about that.
Yeah, and this would probably tie into that. I think for some businesses, especially if they're looking at things like LLMs, et cetera, we're going to run into some issues where they're not going to want to use OpenAI or Azure or these cloud platforms to take their sensitive private data. I realize more and more companies are becoming comfortable with that, but there is a sense in pretty much every industry I've talked to that they feel like these organizations are harvesting their data regardless of what they say, because we recently had the case with Amazon where they said, "Oh no, we're not listening to children." Okay, so we were listening to children, but only most of the time.
Not all of it.
What do you want from us? We're trying to make money. So people have gotten very dubious of what data they're putting into these providers.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So do you have a solution for that right now available?
I do. We've got a couple of different options for on-premises deployments. It depends on how complex the problem is that they're trying to solve, but what we're finding is that for the majority of problems that medium to large scale enterprises are running into, where they do need a high security environment or they do need to manage their own iron, we can meet those needs with some of the newer architectures with some fine tuning based on whatever the task is that they're trying to achieve from it. And then again, the other thing that we run into is that a lot of what people want actually is just traditional machine learning, but they only really got their mind thinking about it because of what you can now do with things like ChatGPT, which I think is really funny because they'll be like, "Oh, what if we can do this?" Like, "Oh yeah, we've been able to do that for 10 years. I would love to do that for you."
Oh my God, that is very. But so, do you also provide the hardware, or?
Yeah, we do hardware and software licensing on top of that for a variety of use cases. So.
Yeah. And do you also have the ability, I don't know, like how many company, especially like medium business, know how to handle hardware appropriately? Is there like something to what would you recommend in terms of like I'm a small or medium company and I
If you're
have
small or medium, you're probably going to be limited to cloud.
cloud? Okay.
Because the introductory price just on the hardware alone, not counting any licensing or anything like that,
Right.
you're looking at about $350,000 to $450,000.
Yeah.
The machines required to run a lot of the stuff at a production scale
Right.
are quite expensive, and that's per unit. So if you're needing to service tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of clients, you may be looking at from hundreds to thousands of units.
Okay.
So that's a significant investment.
Okay, so if you're small to medium, stay in the cloud for now at least, because it's just seems cost prohibitive unless you have a hardware genius on staff that can do all this stuff, right?
Well, and I guess it also depends on like how big your use case is. If it's fairly small, you can get away with some consumer grade hardware. So like for a lot of testing and stuff at home, I've got a stack of 3090s,
Okay.
and that's good for some purposes, but some of the larger LLMs won't even fit on that, and I've got to do a lot of my testing on rented hardware. At some point, I'll wind up purchasing a bay of machines for doing in-house testing. But again, that's a lot of coin to drop all at once.
That's gonna happen in the next few months, Chase. I have a feeling about this.
Very good.
Okay. What about some of the ethics and the considerations? So one is data usage in terms of like cloud providers or things like that. Are there any other ethics consideration? Like I know the EU is regulating AI. Have you heard about anything else coming to the US in terms of like how do we use AI and LLMs and all that stuff?
The US tends to lag behind the EU and especially in technical policies, but any of those types of policy measures tend to be quite behind in the US. There have been some conversations, but it feels like many of the people that we have in power are less interested in actually trying to figure out what's going on and are more interested in trying to find what the next sound bite is that is sensational. And that's unfortunate, because I think that a lot of the people that have been testifying have good things to say. I think that from an ethics perspective, there's a line from, I want to say IBM. I'm actually going to see if I can find it real quick. Give me one moment. Yeah, it was from a 1970s IBM presentation. A computer can never be held accountable. Therefore, a computer must never make a management decision. And so I think that's the crux of any ethics debate right now from a business perspective. What we highly recommend for our clients is to always have a human in the mix, especially if accuracy or sensitivity matters. Let the AI serve to be that force multiplier, so that the person in the middle, all they have to do is review and say, yeah, this is good enough, or no, this is not good, don't do this, kick it out. And so I think that's a big portion of it. As far as like the data and the sensitivity, what's great is you can kind of put some guarantees around that. Kind of, going back to, we've been able to take any arbitrary text and identify PII with a high likelihood in that for a long time. You can use a combination of those methodologies along with whatever has been generated to make double sure that no PII has leaked. But even beyond that, like what you allow to be used for the generation, at that point, you're really looking at traditional standards around data governance, et cetera, how data is acquired in the first place, what processes and what systems are allowed to have access to what data under what circumstances. I think all of that stuff still applies, because if you're trying to embed that knowledge into an output, you have to go get that data. It doesn't just encode it into its brain. You have to give it the context of what it is that you're going to find out about. So my hospital example, it doesn't just know the 10-year data history for that client. You have to go get that 10-year data history, and that's where having the wristband comes in. They tap the wristband or scan the barcode. Now you know that you're dealing with the person that is who they are. They verify verbally what their date of birth is. Now you've got to double check, which you see in the hospital already. Like for anything they do from an IT perspective, this is why, I don't know when the last time you were in the hospital, but if you're in the hospital, they will, at least in the US, give you a wristband, and then before they look at any computer, they always ask you, what's your last name, what's your birthday?
Yeah.
And so it's just a double verification. And then at that point, now a system has the ability to say, okay, well, I'm dealing with this person. I can look at their information for them. I can now summarize this data, et cetera.
You know, it comes to mind, like the people that, the stories of people that I've heard that they lie about who they are at the hospital, and they're like, I don't want an AI.
Yeah.
Knowing who I.
Well, and lying is or you know, et cetera, is a big deal, because like you've got like the gentleman who got disbarred. He lost his legal license in the United States because he just took output direct from ChatGPT, threw it into a legal brief, didn't bother verifying it, didn't do any additional due diligence. I think all that did was expose someone who is probably already a bad lawyer.
Yes.
For being a bad lawyer. I don't know that says anything about the technology itself.
Absolutely. Okay, so we talked about this before, but I definitely want to wrap with this, which is AI taking away jobs from people. And I know you've talked about it a little bit, but you and I were having other conversations about the Larrys of any organization. Do you remember that a little bit?
Oh yeah. So I think one of the things that's cool about AI is being able to take all of the technical information, all like the years of experience and all of the documentation within an organization, and be able to encode that in such a way as that if anybody has a question about how something runs, how something works, how you do a particular thing, they can just ask it like they would ask. There's always a person at the organization that tends to know like everything. I always call that person Larry, like as a general thing. So, oh yeah, talk to Larry. He knows.
There's always one and multiple of those. Like, oh, this person always knows the answer.
This person, just go talk to them. They always know. And so the ability for businesses, for every employee in the business to have their own personal Larry next to them at all times, I think is again goes back to force multiplication.
Yeah.
In the very long term, I think we will see a continued decline in jobs until the EU and the United States and other countries of the world decide what we want to do in a world where most things can be automated. If most things can be automated and the structures of society and of commerce, et cetera, don't make sense anymore, then, or make less sense, then we need to figure out new ways of how society can make sense. And I think we're going to run into some of those walls pretty fast. And whenever they happen, they'll happen incredibly rapidly.
I know it's maybe it's the way I interpret it, but I hear concern in your voice, and at the same time, I'm also hearing like a potential for something new to emerge. The same way you've talked about like a different way to work and think about humans as the value of human beings. What do you think about that? Is it hopefully are our leaders going to enable a future in which this is welcomed and celebrated, and maybe we recognize that going more of a social versus capitalist wave is going to be the thing? Or
I don't know. It's up to the people. So ultimately, our leaders, by and large, are put there by the people, and so there is a choice that has to be made. Do we kill the machine, and do we continue to not have time to spend with our families and continue to have 40, 80, 90-hour weeks just to have a place to live and to have food to eat? Or do we strive for something that's maybe better than that? And I have a feeling that we are going to fight very hard against that possibility. And I don't know. I mean, to me, there is the possibility that we decide, hey, you know what? Maybe I would like life to be better. Maybe I would like an easier life. And it's there for us, but we will ultimately have to decide that that is what we collectively want. And I hope that that is the path that we choose.
I agree. Thank you so much, Chase. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Stop recording.